Imagine a type of control, the kind we usually link with outright brutality, but instead it's quietly taking shape all around us. Yeah. Camouflaged, maybe with a smile, even everyday comforts. Sounds pretty dystopian, right?
Yeah, it does. And what's really kind of unsettling is that this idea, it's not new. It's actually a warning from, what, over 40 years ago?
Exactly, from 1980.
Suggesting a future that, well, might have already been starting back then.
Precisely. So today we're doing a deep dive into Bertram Gross's incredibly prescient work from 1980, Friendly Fascism, the new face of power in America. Gross was warning about this potential corporate dystopia emerging right here in the U.S. It's a really critical look at the subtle ways power could get concentrated in an advanced capitalist society.
And it's quite telling, isn't it, that the book itself apparently faced some of the issues it talks about.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Parts were supposedly expunged, I read, to make repression seem, I don't know, more acceptable. Or maybe it's reversal impossible. It just highlights how relevant the book's own themes were, even back then.
Right. So our goal here, our mission in this deep dive, is really to pull out the core ideas, the surprising insights from Gross's text.
Okay.
We want to help you understand how he defined this friendly fascism, what mechanisms he saw at play, the potential impacts, and maybe even some paths for democratic response he suggested.
And just to be clear, we're exploring this impartially, right?
Yeah.
Focusing only on the ideas and observations in the book itself.
Absolutely. Strictly the source material.
Okay, so let's unpack this core idea, friendly fascism. Gross uses this term, Janus-like the Roman god with two faces.
Two faces. One face is, paternal, benevolent, looks kind, entertaining even. It offers protection.
Protection against enemies, yeah, whether they're real or maybe just imagined.
Exactly. But the chilling part, the real insight here, is that this comforting face is precisely what allows it to disarm people. It masks the true intent.
So what's the other face, then?
Well, it's the executioner's sadistic grin, as he puts it. Yeah. This duality, this mask of friendliness, it's designed to hide the real goal, stripping away power, rights, wealth from the public.
And if you challenge it,
then that darker face, that's when it gets revealed.
So it's fundamentally different from, say, the classic fascism we saw in Italy, Germany, Japan.
Yeah.
No jackboots and overt violence is the main thing.
Right. Gross really emphasizes that. He saw American-friendly fascism as potentially super modern and multi-ethnic.
Super modern and multi-ethnic.
And as American as Madison Avenue executive luncheons, credit cards, and apple pie, it's fascism with a smile.
Fascism with a smile. It's a powerful phrase. But let me push back slightly. Does Gross suggest this smile could eventually drop? Could it still lead to more overt classic control if pushed? Or is the smile meant to be the permanent feature?
That's a really key question. He stresses the distinction. Classic fascism, it openly glorified violence, militarism. Friendly fascism, he argues, sanitizes it. It uses these sort of value-free terms.
Like nuclear exchange.
Exactly, for something horrific. Classic fascism openly attacked democracy. Friendly fascism does it subtly, even using, democratic disguises. The smile is the main method of control, you see.
Okay. And it's not some grand conspiracy, right? Not a secret cabal pulling strings.
No, he's clear on that, too. He didn't see it as a master plan, more like a dominant logic of the situation.
A dominant logic.
Meaning it prevails through, hundreds of separate decisions, separate plans, often secret but not centrally coordinated in that classic conspiracy way. It's more like an emergent trend driven by underlying forces.
Got it. So it emerges from the system itself.
Pretty much. And connecting that back, despite the friendly facade, the velvet gloves, Gross was clear there are many iron fists underneath.
Iron fists, like?
Things like mind management, manipulation, payoffs that are conditional, play ball or else. It's control through comfort and subtle pressure, mostly, not just brute force.
Okay, so if it's not always overt, how exactly did Gross see this weaving into society? What are the specific mechanisms he pointed to for subverting democracy from within?
Well, he starts right with the democratic machinery itself.
Yep.
He suggested that institutions like Congress, the judiciary, instead of being independent checks, they could become integrated into the establishment, basically serving as transmission belts for higher business and political power.
Transmission belts, wow. So less about a direct takeover, more like a quiet co-option.
That's the idea, a gradual alignment of interests.
That's a pretty chilling thought, these supposedly independent branches just becoming extensions of other
Yes.
powers. Does he talk about the local level too? How does that play out?
He does. He mentions things he calls community carnivals. Think about maybe some programs from the 1960s war on poverty.
Like local participation stuff.
Right. On the surface, they look like they're empowering communities. But Gross argues they could actually be used to sort of co-opt local leaders, divert attention from bigger issues, maybe provide a few small jobs.
But without actually giving communities real power or challenging the underlying structures.
Exactly. Engagement, but maybe not genuine empowerment.
And what about politics itself, like the parties? Even the competition between them could be part of this.
Yeah, he saw what he called contrapuntal party harmony.
Contrapuntal.
Yeah.
Like in music. Two melodies playing against each other, but creating harmony.
Kind of. So the parties look different, right? Maybe Republicans favor tight money, Democrats favor loose money, for example.
Sure, they campaign on differences.
But Gross argued that ultimately this apparent competition might serve to protect the faceless oligarchs, as he put it, by keeping the public focused on these surface differences.
And diverting attention from the bigger picture of, say, macro business interests that both parties might quietly support.
Precisely. It's a fascinating, maybe cynical take on how conflict can actually mask a deeper unity of purpose at a certain level.
And he even brings up Watergate.
Yeah.
I mean, most people saw that as democracy working, exposing corruption.
Right, but Gross suggests maybe the powerful learned a different lesson, not about democracy's strength, but maybe how not to get caught next time.
Yeah.
How to conduct things more subtly. Maybe what some theorists call preventative coup, like how to subtly keep an elected government you don't like from actually taking power or implementing its agenda.
So learning to subvert indirectly, avoiding those mistakes of overt conspiracy.
That's the implication. Less Nixon, maybe more finesse.
Okay, so we've got the mechanics of control through institutions, even through political spectacle. But Gross goes deeper, doesn't he, into how our actual ideas, our ideologies get shaped or, as you said, purified.
Oh, absolutely. He really gets into the whole management of information in minds. He talks about information as the march and specifically the hypnotizing effect of TV.
Even back in 1980, he saw that.
Yeah, and he worried about how personalized information he was thinking about early cable TV then could lead to what he called cultural ghettoization.
Meaning everyone just consumes media that confirms their existing views.
Sort of, yeah. And it could create this illusionary participation, like participating in well-controlled plebiscites. He even mentioned a real project, Minerva.
Minerva.
Yeah, involving big names like Chase Manhattan, Bell System, IBM, Coca-Cola. He saw it as an example of this kind of staged civic engagement, looked grassroots, but was actually carefully managed from the top. An early warning sign.
Wow. And it connects to his idea of puffery, right? Like lying in advertising bleeding over into politics.
Exactly. Creating these impressive myths that maybe disguise what he saw as capitalist exploitation. And think about information overload.
There's just so much out there.
Right. So he points out that just filtering out information becomes a massive form of suppression. You can't possibly process everything.
He used the New York Times example.
Yeah, saying they printed maybe only 1% of the available news. So what gets left out? That creates non-events. And then you have pseudo-events created specifically to be reported to manage what the public sees and thinks about.
So it's not just what you see, it's crucially about what you don't see.
Precisely. And he saw this getting worse with media consolidation. Independent outlets becoming part of huge transnational conglomerates.
Which leads
what he called prior restraint. Not necessarily overt censorship, maybe, but dissenting voices just get eased out. Or maybe channeled into harmless activities, things that don't challenge the core structures.
Okay, and this ties into polling too. Manufacturing opinion.
Definitely. He saw polls, especially when combined with sophisticated image creation techniques.
Like the Nixon example you mentioned. The semantic differential test.
Yeah, measuring emotional reactions to craft a political image. He saw these becoming tools for a politics that was purposefully analytic, empirically opportunistic, and administratively manipulative, using data to shape perception and behavior.
And then the really scary part, the data collection itself. Womb-to-tomb dossier.
Chilling phrase, isn't it? He envisioned these vast databanks, networks, pooling personal information from everywhere, potentially precision purging. Witch hunts based on data, on guilt by association. He paints this picture. Someone saying, I have in my hand a computer printout proving that.
It's basically surveillance capitalism predicted decades ago.
In many ways, yes. A surveillance state justified by efficiency or security, maybe, but enabling new forms of control.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. He also talked about purifying ideologies themselves, like core beliefs.
Right. He looked at the post-World War II era. The idea that communism and socialism are bad wasn't just an opinion, he argued. It was actively transformed into a dominant ideology.
How so?
It became deeply entrenched, he said, even invigorated by former communists who flipped sides. It became a powerful tool for social control, for defining who was in and who was out.
And on the flip side,
Yeah, right.
the capitalism is good ideology.
He pointed to huge investments in public relations to create this image of the soulful corporation. Yeah. Portraying big business as being clothed with public interest, acting for the common good, even if, historically, it might have been seen differently, maybe more selfish, venal, and mean, as he put it. It's a massive rebranding effort.
And academics played a role here, too, with the end of ideology idea.
He thought so. Academics and intellectuals contributed to this notion that, the big problems were solved, wealth distribution was getting better, fundamental political conflicts were over.
Led them to become
maybe just technicians, he worried. No longer interested in ideas for their own sake, focused on narrow problems, avoiding bigger systemic analysis. It sounds like a critique of intellectual complacency, maybe?
a kind of self-censorship within academia itself.
Or at least a narrowing of focus that served the status quo, perhaps unintentionally.
Okay, so all these mechanisms, institutional, informational, ideological, they all point back to the economy, right? Gross saw an economic engine driving this whole thing.
Absolutely. He warned very clearly about a slow and powerful drift towards ever greater concentration of power and wealth.
In whose hands?
In what he called a repressive big business, big government partnership. The end result, he feared, could be a kind of corporatist serfdom. The economy isn't just backdrop, it's the core machinery.
And his take on trickle-down economics was pretty sharp, wasn't it?
Very sharp. He basically saw it as just a justification or rationale for policies that actually move money upwards.
Upwards to?
To the truly rich, he said. Through what he called, sarcastically I imagine, the largest corporate welfare program in U.S. history.
Meaning tax breaks, loans, regulatory favors for big corporations.
Exactly. And he argued this happens, of course, alongside cuts to income support for ordinary people, maybe higher taxes, direct or indirect, on the poor and middle class. It's a systematic wealth transfer, but disguised as sound economic policy.
He also had that term, the warfare-welfare state. How did those two fit together in his view?
Well, he saw welfare having a dual role. On one hand, maybe controlling the surplus population, keeping social unrest down. On the other, expanding consumer markets.
Okay. And warfare?
Warfare keeps potential rivals in check internationally, but also, crucially, it staves off economic stagnation at home through massive government spending.
And he saw links between them.
Yeah, he pointed out how welfare programs often end up subsidizing corporations, too, like food stamps, boosting grocery sales, or housing subsidies benefiting developers. So these seemingly separate spheres were deeply interconnected in his analysis.
What about economic downturns? He talked about the shift from calling them depressions to recessions.
Right, softening the language, managing public perception. But he also looked at the policy behind it, the trade-off idea.
The trade-off between inflation and unemployment.
Exactly. Using recession, deliberately creating unemployment as a tool to prevent runaway inflation. He was very critical of the hidden cost of that policy choice.
And this connects to his ideas about shortages, that sometimes shortages are manufactured.
Yeah, it's a counterintuitive idea. He argued that new technologies could actually create abundance, which is a problem for corporations that profit from scarcity.
A shortage of shortages, he called it.
Right. So how do you maintain profits? Well, maybe by keeping production down artificially, restricting competition, using patent monopolies, creating well-made shortages.
He had that oil industry example, right?
Yes, suggesting that OPEC and the Western oil cartels might have been quietly cooperating to raise prices while publicly blaming only OPEC, creating this false impression of conflict to justify higher prices driven by controlled scarcity.
It's a pretty intricate picture of economic management for elite benefit.
That was certainly his argument.
And this vision extended globally too, right? He talked about a kind of indirect empire.
Neocolonialism. Not old school empires, but control exercised through other means.
Like
like local subsidiaries of transnational corporations, a huge network of foreign military bases. He said over 400 major ones back then, intelligence agencies like the CIA, economic aid programs, all designed to create industrial dependencies and integrate local elites into an Americanized global system.
Control without having to plant a flag everywhere.
Essentially, yes, economic and cultural influence backed by military power.
And speaking of military power, how did he see the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower had warned about?
He definitely thought its power hadn't diminished, even if it didn't have, a single board of directors making all the decisions.
More diffuse.
More diffuse, but still incredibly powerful. And he made this interesting point that sometimes civilian leaders, he mentioned Brzezinski or Paul Netzier's examples, could actually be much more bloodthirsty than any top brass.
Why?
Perhaps less constrained by direct military experience. And he also noted that military professionals themselves were adopting more corporate-style entrepreneur ethics, war becoming more like a business.
That connects back to the sanitizing of violence you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. Modern warfare, with its potential for immense destruction, gets hidden behind these abstract terms. Nuclear exchange, counterforce, flexible response.
Creating distance.
Huge psychological distances, he called it, between the elites making decisions and the ordinary people who might suffer the consequences. He talked about the sheer scale of unlimited overkill capability.
Like what specifically?
Things like MIRVs, multiple warheads on one missile, even speculating about ocean explosions to create tsunamis, and the thousands of tactical nuclear weapons deployed, especially in Europe, each averaging, he said, 5 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb.
Wow. With the goal being?
Ostensibly, victory without shattering cities. A terrifyingly clean, detached vision of mass destruction.
And this all led him to coin that acronym, MADDEST.
Yeah, MADDEST. Militarism, atom, nuclear power weapons, drugs, environmental destruction, sex as a control mechanism, we'll get to that, and totalitarianism.
So it wasn't just about the military itself.
No, it was a warning about the broader permeation of a militaristic mindset and these interconnected destructive forces throughout society, eroding civil liberties and distracting everyone from social injustice. It's a really comprehensive and grim vision.
Grim is right. So what did he see as the direct social impact of all this? How does it affect people's everyday lives, communities?
Well, he definitely saw an erosion of community and well-being. Work itself becomes fragmented. Employees feel disconnected from the end products, maybe isolated from each other, too.
Alienated.
Pretty much. And things like increased migration or urban redevelopment projects that displace people, they break down traditional community and family ties, often pushing the poor out of revitalized areas, a sort of quiet social dismantling.
And he linked economic problems directly to mental health.
Very directly.
Yeah.
He noted how unemployed people often feel worthless, doubt their own worth, and have little faith or confidence in themselves. He saw a correlation with increased admissions to mental hospitals, the personal cost of economic policy.
He also talked about crime, calling out some dirty secrets.
Yeah, the dirty little secret, as he put it, that maybe the police can't actually do much about street crime because it's fundamentally a side effect of poverty and social fragmentation.
So it's tackling symptoms, not the root cause.
That's the implication. And he highlighted the disparity. It's the poor who suffer most from lower-class crime. Victimization rates are highest in slums.
But then he contrasts this with corporate crime.
Right. A completely different world. Corporate lawbreakers, in his view, they don't see themselves as criminals. They have high status. They're protected by special procedures, by armies of fixers, lawyers, accountants, PR people.
Adulting in.
Usually just gentle taps on the wrist. He cited a study of 70 large corporations where not a single one had a clean record regarding legal violations. It points to a 2-tiered justice system.
And to cope with all this anxiety and maybe powerlessness, Friendly Fascism offers relief.
Varied relief, he called it, through things like sex, drugs, maybe getting lost in cults or madness, alcoholism, gambling, even consuming ultra-violent drama. Distractions and escapes.
He even saw psychotherapy potentially being misused.
Yeah, warning it could become an instrument of direct repression in some cases. And he had this really provocative idea about the engineered routinization of sex.
What did he mean by that?
Maybe stripping sex of its deep emotional content, turning it into just another managed, predictable activity. And that this, paradoxically, could help reconcile people to the servitude, which is their fate. Pacifying people through managed pleasure and emotional detachment, it's a truly dark thought.
Okay, so what does all this fragmentation and control mean for work itself, especially for professionals?
Well, he argued that even new technologies, which you might think would lead to more fulfilling work, often just result in more fragmentation of both physical and mental labor.
How so for professionals?
They become hyperspecialists, stuck in their tight little islands of security, using impenetrable jargon. This isolates them from each other, makes them more susceptible to regimentation, and maybe blinds them to their own role in the bigger picture of concentrating power.
So even educated people can just become like highly specialized cogs in this larger, maybe less democratic machine.
That was his warning, that expertise could be siloed and controlled, preventing a holistic understanding or critique of the system.
Right. Okay, this has been a pretty bleak picture, understandably. But Gross didn't leave it entirely there, did he? He offered some kind of counter-narrative, the logic of true democracy.
He did. It's really important. He stressed, it hasn't happened yet. That was crucial. Despite all the erosion he saw, democratic openness and opportunity still existed.
So there's still space to act.
Yes. Civil liberties, rights, they were alive, he wrote, although not in the best of health, and can be fought for openly. The potential for resistance, for asserting democratic values, it was still there.
And he saw signs of this resistance.
He did. He talked about more flowers than before. Even if the specific movements of the new left had faded, he saw new currents, new undercurrents emerging.
Flowers of change, like what?
Responses to the problems he identified: social disorganization, stagflation, environmental damage, people expressing these fundamental human needs for participation, for commitment, for community. It suggests that even under pressure, that desire for change persists.
So what did true democracy mean for Gross then, if it wasn't a finished state?
He saw it as an eternal struggle, a process, not a static condition. Just resisting concentrated power, even just saying no, was a positive democratic act in itself.
And he saw this happening?
He pointed to the unpopularity, even then, of big business and big government. He saw citizen activism, the new vigor, as he put it, of minority political movements. He mentioned libertarians and radicals specifically as forces challenging that status quo. It's about constant vigilance, constant participation.
Did he offer concrete ideas, like for the economy?
Yes, he talked about needing a positive program to fight stagflation, for instance, through things like guaranteed jobs and price stability. Also, significantly reducing war spending and converting military industries to peacetime activities.
And involving people more directly.
Definitely. He floated the idea of decentralized planning, starting from the bottom up, requiring active citizen engagement outside just formal government structures. So it wasn't just critique, he was thinking about solutions, too.
And information is key here again, right? Fighting the control.
Absolutely critical. He called for much more and better publicized revelationary activity. Muckraking.
But not just exposing scandals.
No, not just specific evils, but attacking the basic patterns of control, getting at the systemic issues. And alongside that, he advocated for counterindicators and counter-analysis.
Meaning?
Developing alternative ways to measure well-being, alternative ways to analyze data, to challenge the potentially misleading official statistics and narratives, fighting information control with better independent information.
And finally, he saw a potential shift in values.
Yeah, he pointed to polls suggesting what he called a significant value shift away from pure materialism, people prioritizing moral, aesthetic, community values.
A pushback against the purely technocratic.
Exactly. A search for more ethical ways of living, more meaningful connections, which he saw emerging across different professions and parts of society. A kind of underlying yearning for something more than just efficiency and consumption.
But he wasn't overly optimistic, was he? He stressed realism.
Very much so. He quoted Samuel Johnson about power always gradually stealing away from the many to the few because the few are more vigilant and consistent. A constant battle.
So what's the takeaway for individuals?
Well, he acknowledged that no one person can do very much alone. That's why networks, coalitions, working together are so important. But crucially, he warned against expecting Monday morning miracles.
You need to be patient.
Yes. Have realistic expectations. Small victories are possible, maybe even likely with persistence, but activists have to guard against being co-opted and avoid getting doomed to quick frustration and apathetic withdrawal if big changes don't happen overnight. It's a call for persistent, patient, vigilant action.
Okay, so this deep dive into Bertram Gross's Friendly Fascism, it really paints this chillingly detailed picture of how control could operate subtly.
Right.
Power centralized not by force alone, but through this kind of gentle, pervasive conditioning.
Yeah, it's a world where comfort itself could become a kind of cage, and the feeling of having choices might mask a deeper kind of servitude.
Gross had that quote about the Declaration of Independence, how it promised so much democracy, but nobody who was anybody believed it. Everybody who was anybody, they doubted it. That really makes you think, doesn't it? What does it mean when a society's founding promises are met with that kind of skepticism, especially by the powerful?
It's a profound question, and as you, listening, reflect on the mechanisms and impacts Gross laid out all those years ago, maybe ask yourself, do you see elements of this friendly fascism in the world today? And perhaps more importantly, how can we all, as informed individuals, work to make sure that the real promises of democracy don't just become an illusion in our own lives, our own communities,